Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mantras for Peace today with Gina Salā, dear sister friend and fellow lover of sound, really. So welcome, sweetheart.
Oh, thank you. Nice to be here with you and with all of you. Thank you so much.
I'm really looking forward to a deep conversation with you because, you just briefly about you for our audience. You've been singing and chanting mantra and on the stage as an instrument of peace for how many years?
Oh, my goodness. Well, it's funny you said it that way. I actually started chanting when I was 2 years old, and I'm 52. So in the Yashodhara ashram, in Swami Shivananda Radha's ashram. So we had mantra every night, India style. But that made me realize in the early 90s, Swami Radha sent me to the ashram for what I thought was a workshop to take. And when I arrived, she had sort of tricked me. It was a workshop I was teaching.
Oh, sneaky.
I know. And it just, when you said the instrument, it made me think of something. I was so nervous. I was like, oh, I'm not ready. I'm not worthy. Oh my gosh. I was in my early 20s. And I went into the bookstore, and Swami Shivananda had, it was full of his books. That was our guru grandfather, you could say. And I was saying, please, please help me be an instrument. Please help me be an instrument. I'm not sure what to say and teach. It was actually called a heart song workshop that they advertised. I didn't know that I was the teacher. And I opened this book. This is the early 90s. So in answer to your question, that's probably the first time I was doing this publicly. And I opened this book. And you know how back in the day I would open a book, pray, and open the book and look for the answer? Yeah. And the answer was, of course we're all instruments of the divine. I said, thank you. Very good.
Okay, got it.
Right, like I'm going to be an instrument and they're not, like everyone who shows up. But anyway, I've had some beautiful teachers throughout this life.
And therefore, you are a beautiful teacher as a channel of that continuation of the wisdom and, even peeling back another layer, just an instrument of the nada, of that primordial love vibration that is substratum of everything.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
yeah. Sometimes
for
I feel
those
like...
who don't...
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
I was going to say, for those of you who don't know who Gina is, she just has this incredible bio of so many. You sing in so many languages. You've had very big stages that you've sung on, and so many collaborations. Just really a gem in the field. So. But you don't need to know any of that. All you need to know is just look at her and hear her voice to get it.
We're all millions of years old.
So anyway, welcome, big hearty welcome, and
thank you very much. Yeah.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, I feel like sometimes like the kid in reading class who has lots of tutors because they needed it. Somehow in this life I've had these great teachers, and I've also had like big challenges like so many people, and I sort of laugh, like instead of thinking, aha, I've had these great teachers, and I have, well-known teachers. It's more like, oh, I must have needed the help.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to one of the first questions that I had for you. This time, end of August 2020, we can't even count the number of crazy things that are happening in the world, and then definitely how that's impacting all of us on a personal scale. How do you use your sound practice to cope, to be resilient, to, like, what does your sound practice mean for you in establishing peace?
Thank you. Well, good question. And by the way, well done on you and getting, using the medium of the internet and things to really spread these practices, because they're so powerful. Every single person has a voice, as you well know, that is medicinal and can bring us to our essential self. And today, I mentioned briefly right when we got on the phone, today is a really good example for me. In the last 2 hours, I've spoken to my mother who's crying because my father fell and is in the hospital, and they're having trouble getting him to respond, and she's not allowed to visit him. My
COVID?
house, not COVID related, he has a melanoma, but when he was going to go to the surgery, he fell and he has seizures and he's having trouble. So then also my housemate just came home from the hospital for another issue. And then I just got word that one of my dear students just had to evacuate her house from the fires in California. So this is all in the last basically hour. And for me, I use my sound practice not to deny, like, la la la, nothing's happening here. It's getting to the point, isn't it, in the world where we can't do that. We can't be like, do do do. The body's going to react. The heart. I just cried my eyes out with my mama. I love her so much. I love my dad. And I think that in history, sometimes people have used, and I have certainly in my younger years, spiritual practice to bypass. I also, in the early years, I had ashram years, but then there was a lot of addiction in our house and all kinds of stuff, a lot of drama. And those practices of just mantra, I would chant the mantra, I would also chant the rosary, and I would also sing to my animals outside, like all these different forms. And I had really bad asthma. So all these things would help me connect with the breath and the body. Because what I've discovered is if I'm not in my body, no matter how much spiritually I can feel, connect with God, as soon as I'm out of that moment of practice, I'll crash into my life and the poor nervous system's freaking out again. So for me, I use mantra, of course, and some sounding and chanting practices and breath. And practices that really help me to connect to something bigger than my ego self, but to stay connected to my small self. That's the important part that has really been the last 20 years for me. To really stay connected to all those other aspects. So chant mantra, sometimes out loud, sometimes not, and song.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you said that, because you said I don't know how we could bypass now, like we're just getting to that point where it's impossible. But I don't know, I might argue with you on that, because depending on your level of privilege, and not you specifically, but I mean, depending on a person's level of privilege, that bypass road can just keep on going.
That's true, yeah.
And I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm also really passionate about the potential of a spiritual practice for embodiment and building true resilience to embrace and actually digest and process what's alive for us during these really intense times. And so the fact that you said that just, I just feel even more delight and resonance that we're so much on the same page there.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff around, as you know, about people saying spiritual bypassing, don't spiritual bypass. And what I want to really say is, if you have learned to spiritually bypass, don't kick yourself about it. That was a strategy that you needed at the time.
Yeah.
But we're evolving past even that schism, right? Between, here's my spiritual self. Of course, I am not this body, and at the same time, this is divine, right? So for me, and in my early years, it was really about spiritual bypassing. My first 25 years of life, I was like, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm going to float over here. Thank goodness. And I was floating around in India. I know you were too.
I know.
And
could join the spiritual bypass club, ex-bypassers.
Totally. And then life gives you experiences. I've had a lot of experiences to really make this body choose to live. And those gifts, we don't always know. Sometimes you're given a gift and it's not just for you.
Yeah.
So I think right now it's really about finding ways to connect, of course, beyond the physical, because you and I aren't even in the same physical proximity, but through the medium of the body. And that's why I love voice work so much. And even unsounded voice work, if you're in the elevator chanting whatever a mantra is useful for you,
Yeah.
It's a very beautiful technology.
Yeah. That unsounded voice work is, because just like the spectrum of visible light, we only see, we only have the instruments to see so much, and the same with the sound. With the sound, we only have the instruments to hear so much. But as we know, there's so much vibration that is very real, very active and alive, outside of the range of our little eardrum to pick up. And so a lot of times when people ask me, oh, well, does it matter if I chant it out loud? And, I'm like, well, your mantra, especially if you're using the mantra as a life jacket, there's so much possibility there that I think is so relevant for people who don't want to be that weirdo chanting in the elevator out loud.
Although there are a lot.
You and I have probably also been that too.
Yeah. You'll get your 6 feet. But really, even just humming. I mean, you can do a low hum, harmonize with the sound of the elevator or the dentist office drill or whatever it is. There's a lot that we can do to really feel that vibration. So I recommend, personally, with my students and in general, to do some out loud. But then if you get it strong enough, this vibration, this felt sense, then you can actually feel it and connect with it when it's not allowed. Not out loud, I mean.
Not allowed out loud. Or sometimes when you just want to keep that to yourself. I mean, sometimes you just
go deeper in it.
You want to be in that more subtle, silent space.
True. Yeah. The subtle is more powerful, actually.
Yeah. Well, so I want to just circle back to this theme of evolving beyond spiritual bypassing. And aside from the beautiful, very practical suggestions that you just given, is there any way that you like to teach or approach using sound and voice and mantra to penetrate and to, I want to say, like, cut yourself off at that bypass and do something different than than the habit of bypassing? How do you use sound that way?
For me, so I grew up in the ashram that I lived in. It's pretty austere. Like, it was pretty and my brother and I were the only kids for a while. So it was this sort of like meditate. And so I have I think I developed in reaction or response to that. I still have this playful side. So if I feel myself wanting to bypass, and you can feel it, I guess part of it is just getting in touch.
What does it feel like?
I was just going to say, part of it is getting in touch with what it feels like. To be in touch with the body enough to notice when you're trying to cut off at the throat or at the breath, right? When I stop breathing, guess what? I don't want to feel what's happening.
So your your shoulders
Yeah, my shoulders come
came
up,
up.
my jaw might tighten. People do it differently. Some people clench their bum, some people clench their toes. But the
Or their
point
hands.
is to become really aware of what the body's doing. And then for me, the part that's important is not to judge it like, don't bypass. Instead, be like, oh, there you go, running away, eh? What you want? That's my Canadian side coming out there. But really, to really cajole a little bit and come into it. Because we've had enough harshness. Haven't we had enough harshness on austerities? I don't mean austerities. There's tapasya. Tapasya meaning sitting in the fire of the practice. That's very valuable. But in order to even come close, there has to be a glow that draws you in. And that glow is love for me. So if I feel myself starting to hold my breath, my practice is to just keep scanning my body, keep noticing what I feel and what the body's feeling and what's the breath doing. And then I'm like, oh, are my shoulders trying to protect my chest? Earlier, my mom, as I mentioned today, I was talking to my mom. My mom is crying. What's harder than hearing your own mother cry? And I felt myself, oh, and then I have an interview. Well, what am I going to do? Shut that down and pull it together and just, no, so I just breathe with her and feel it and know that if, however I showed up, however you show up, however we show up, we are loved. So let the voice even express what is coming in. I use my voice to move emotion and energy, and then also to connect with that essential self through mantra. But I let myself give voice to what's arising too. Sometimes it might sound kind of funny, like a moany, groany, whiny. I'll let that happen. And some of my best songs have come out of giving voice to that and then listening for the response. And the loving response is so beautiful, and it's in every single one of us, Yeah.
When we are aware enough of the knee-jerk clenching, and again, like what you're drawing on is so perfect and loving, that when you catch that, the first response might be to lean into self-compassion rather than self-judgment, because we bypass because we're afraid and overwhelmed.
And because we think that emotion isn't okay, or we can't handle it, and maybe at a time we couldn't. But love makes it possible. So having that witness consciousness that a mantra or a chant or singing practice develops gives us the capacity to go, oh, chest is clenching, breath is holding, I'm trying to hold back from this. Honey, you've been through this before, you're okay. Just breathe. And that loving witness, that compassionate, loving awareness. It's not even the self-talk necessarily, like I just said. It's more of a presence that we also are. Give space for it all. And I think that going back to your earlier question, these COVID times, but there's always things that happen in people's lives. But this is really bringing it to stark relief. Is how do I be with all that arises in myself and in the person next to me who's also maybe freaking out more than either of us are expressing. And to me, it's to feel it in myself. And that's where sounding isn't always pretty. I let my voice and my students sort of explore the nooks and crannies, but then we establish before and after that witness through some sound practices.
Yeah, to make a safe that's space enough. Make a space that's safe enough within the container of the sound to be able to feel that full aliveness.
Because there's no part of us that's a mistake. If you're feeling overwhelmed or angry or sad or jealous or any of that, that's not bad. That just needs repressing it isn't going to help. Finally, we're on this path long enough to know, oh, I have all the shadows that everyone else has. Might as well bring them out into the light, witness them, let the energy move, and maintain that witness. And in that living witness, they naturally transform like night into day and day into night. Yeah. I don't know if that was very specific, but I hope that made sense for you.
I hope it made sense for everyone. Just to be in the flow of the thoughts about it.
Literally to do whatever it takes to establish a witness. Maybe it's chant, maybe it's pray, maybe it's hum, maybe it's some breathing so you can really watch your emotions and then give them sound. Let them have their voice and then go back. There's something that happens if you can lovingly witness the voice expressing what's in there. There's like the heart breaks open, just like if you heard a friend expressing. It's beautiful. Yeah, for me, that's one of the practices. Of course, I have more regular yogic practices, but that feels important now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, yeah. Not that you need my agreement, but really,
I love you.
Feels very. Just that idea and that invitation feels like medicine for right now. Yeah. When we're working with sound and mantra, there can be like this leaning in towards the silence and then a leaning out towards vocalization and expression, you know. And I would like to ask you, when you're working with people or in your own practice, what is something that has kind of surprised you about that journey? Because you've witnessed hundreds or thousands of people kind of go through the transformative process in working with their voice, both leaning in and leaning out. And name a theme, and tell me what has kind of surprised you when you observe that journey of people.
You know, something that has surprised me but is normal now is that when we really lean in and start to get to know our voice, start to make space for it, there is so much love and wisdom in every single person. It blows me away. Like the things that are said, the sounds that come out. And as an aside, and I'm sure you've had this experience, some of the most beautiful things I've ever heard, and I really care about Shruti and Swara and tuning, and I love that as an artist. But some of the most beautiful things I've heard have just been the authenticity. I'm thinking right now of this really old woman in India who was like crackly voice. I mean, if you thought like vocal technique, you know, it was out the window. But it's so beautiful. And that when people, when we start to touch our really authentic self, and behind that an even more essential self, capital S self, there is so much consistent love and wisdom. It never fails. It's always there. Sometimes there's a bunch of monsters in front of it. You know, monsters of
All the
fear, monsters of
self-judgment.
self-judgment, condemnation, shame, blame, regret, all that. But behind it is like the most beautiful, loving presence that you've ever seen. And it always is there. You know, like someone said, if you're going through hell, don't stop. Keep going, keep going, keep a little bit farther. And it's not that they're always, you have to go through the gargoyle world, but, you know, in everyone's life at some point, there's the fears you face and there's the challenges you face. But then we reach this point where you're like, wow, I am not that small self that I might have thought I was. And there's this other holding. So I think that's the most stunning thing. I'm surprised and in awe every single time. And yet I expect it. I know it's there.
Yeah, it makes me think about, I mean, I live in Hawaii. I'm lucky to be settled here on Hawaiian land, and it rains a lot and it's sunny a lot, and so we see rainbows all the time. And I know enough to know when to expect them. I can kind of predict. I know rainbow weather, but it's still delightful, and I'm in awe every single time.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
finding that the beauty behind the voice is a similar thing.
And don't you find that in yourself too? Like I've gotten to the point where if a big wave of something's coming through, it's kind of like when you see the rain and the sun, you're like, oh, here comes a rainbow. When I feel
Yeah.
like a big wave, I'm like, okay, this is good. There's going to be a big breakthrough coming. And it's almost, or like surfing, right, in Hawaii, to know, like, I'm not going to fight this wave. I'm going to go under it and let it like become seaweed for a minute if it gets really big.
Yeah.
There's a trust that gets
Yeah.
developed, and that's the beauty, as you know, of sadhana, of a regular something over time that we do. And I know you offer that, and I offer that, and
Yeah.
just to hold each other's hands and say, you can stay in this, you can stay in this, because we build this capacity to have a kind of trust inside, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think at the core of what this Mantras for Peace project is promoting is, for people who don't already have that stability in peace and stability in the love that is at the heart of the sound, how can we inspire others to develop that within? Because I can see you're just this, especially knowing what's going on for you in the last hour, for you to be able to tap your 50 years of practice, and that's just in this body, in this bodysuit. But seriously, like to show up with the grace and the wisdom that you're showing up for in this moment is
thank you.
couldn't be a better testament to the power of sound.
Thank you.
Really.
And I used my mantra and I chanted. But it reminds me, you're saying that reminded me, years ago I was asked to be a guest speaker at a Unity church, which again, my practice is more raga and mantra, but I also love Jesus and I love anything that points to love and truth, So I showed up and I had just had a relationship breakup. This is maybe 15 years ago. And I showed up and they're like, we're so glad you're here. You're always so joyful. And I was like in the back room where like the ministers go, and I was the guest speaker and singer. And I was like, I felt like such a fake. Have you guys ever felt like a fake? And I said, honestly, my heart is breaking right now, And this woman who had witnessed me many times, she goes, yeah, but what you know is joy is deeper than the pain. And I do know that. It's not that we don't feel the pain, it's that we know that there is something, it's like salt in a big lake rather than salt in a little glass of water. Salt in a big lake doesn't make it as salty. So this little song came, joy is deeper than the pain. Joy is deeper than the pain. Behind the morning clouds, the sun is shining through the rain, and joy is deeper than the pain. So it just made me think of your rainbow analogy, because that song was born right there.
Right there.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's just tremendous that that you can have that sense of, forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but almost like excitement or anticipation when you feel a big wave of the unknown or change coming, that it sounds like you feel almost playful with that, because by now that also means something really beautiful is coming around the bend.
Yeah, I would say more that I feel, the child in me can feel hurt or scared and want to run away. But we all have that. We all have that fraidy cat child. Mahatma Gandhi was a total fraidy cat, right? Like as a kid, that's why he learned to chant Ram, Ram, Ram. But then we grab on, we build a trust between that small, scared self and the big absolute. So it's both at the same time, I would say. You know, it's not that I don't feel all the other things, it's that it's in a bigger lake. It's that the banks of the river get bigger. And like anyone else, I stumble, I forget, we're human, and that's okay. But I feel that there's been enough experiences so far that there's a lot of trust, and I know that practices work. So I use practices to help me come back to peace, both for myself, and that's in mantra and singing and chanting, the things I do with my students, but also, you know, when we're in a peaceful vibration, when we can come to peace, we don't have to make, our turmoil doesn't have to turn into anyone else's turmoil, you know? But we don't have to deny it either. That's how we have empathy, isn't it? Like, yeah, we're all in this boat. Different boats, it's true. Some people have boats that look like cruise ships. But eventually, I think we all play all the roles. That's at least my belief. Who knows whether or not it's true? We have a shared humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing your peace and your presence. I'm sure we could continue on, but this feels like a beautiful cup to offer and flow over to the people who are going to tune in.
Well, thank you also for all your sharing. I know it's beautiful. You are my sister in sound with raga and mantra and just, you know, everybody's got their role in this world and there's so much room for everybody. And I just really appreciate who you are and what you're sharing. And, you know, I'm just happy to talk with you and be here on this morning especially.
Yeah, ditto. And really deep bow to everything that you have done and continue to do for making your voice an instrument for peace.
Thank you.
Day in and day out for 50 years. Woohoo!
Well, okay, I have to clarify. It's not that I've been consistent. I had teenage years and all kinds of years where I was,
come on. We can count all that as part of being human, don't you think?
You know, and if we look at it that way, everybody's life has been their practice. But I have definitely had a focus on sound this lifetime. And,
I mean,
and I just
shine in that. You shine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like to have what a blessing that your entire embodiment in this lifetime has been blessed in that way. I mean, that's incredible.
Well, we all, like I said, we're all so many, I don't know, we're all millions of years old. And I am just, one of my things I love is hearing everybody's voice. I love how different our voices are, our experiences. Everybody's got their things that they can share and teach. And I'm super grateful that this is my Dharma, as I imagine you are too. Dharma meaning, you know, what we share, our path. But it's so important not to, and you know this, for sometimes like when people come, they're like, oh, my voice. And boy, I'll tell you, just one thing is when I first tried out to be in a musical in high school, I was the only person who got no vocal part because I was so bad. Like literally, I was like the flat-chested munchkin, which didn't even get to sing. So wherever you are, your voice, we don't know where it's going to take you. We don't know what's going to unfold. I was just locked down in a lot of fear and trauma at that time. And then who knows, something opens us up. So there's room for everybody. And I'm so glad that you and I get to be sisters in this path.
Oh, me too. And I think sometimes experiences like that just serve to underscore your desire to sing. Right? Like if you get rejected or put down or like shut down, that just when in my points in my life when that's happened to me, it just has served to intensify the urge And that gives me the motivation to do the practices, to develop the muscles, to, to make it happen. And sometimes, I'm supposing that people who are still with us in this interview are maybe imagining when that might have happened for them, as well for you as well. And so I love this theme that we're going with here.
And it can actually send us underground. It made me go, okay, I'm not a singer. That's what I did. I was not that strong. But what I did is, because I had an early practice of mantra, it just meant I'm just singing for me and God. I'm just singing in my spiritual practice. So it actually took me out of performance world for a couple of decades, or for a decade and a half, which was perfect. You know what I mean? So for everyone, it's different. But you're right, and I know you're so good with folks in that too, that a lot of times the people who've been the most shut down or thought they didn't have a good voice, those are the ones that, these voices, it's like the irises that bloom a little bit later than the buttercups, Who knows? They're all different kinds of things. But
those are the voices that just floor you.
They do.
With the authenticity and
the power.
passion.
Yeah. And you're like, wow. There's over my fence right there have been some sunflowers growing and growing. Okay, they became like 10 feet tall. And I kept thinking at like 3 feet they're going to bloom. 4 feet, nope. 5 feet. I'm like, really? 8 feet? They bloomed at about 10 feet is when they decided to bloom their sunflowers. And I think that was such a good metaphor for anyone who feels like a late bloomer with your voice, with your practice. Perfect timing. Who is in charge? There's a bigger orchestration.
Hey, hallelujah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it makes me think of one of my, when I first started learning raga and singing, really, I was at the Dayananda ashram in Rishikesh, and Swami, what was his name? Aparokshananda Swami, he was 83 at the time, and he had never sung before, and he asked me to teach him lessons.
Wow.
And of course I was completely just stunned and honored that this illustrious scholar, wanted to learn how to, would think he could learn something from little old me. Excuse me. But it was that the yearning to sing love back to the Creator that inspired that, and again, like for everyone who's with us in this conversation, there's no too late in life.
Right.
There's no good voice or bad voice. And the healing and the nourishment and the establishment in grounded peace is it's just there. It's waiting.
Yes. And that peace can be there at the same time, and this is how we avoid bypassing, as whatever vrittis are happening, whatever waves of emotion, so that presence of peace is there. I love it. I love that you taught him how to sing. That's the whole thing. We each have things we can share at different moments for different people. I love it.
It was so fun. We just went to the sargam. It was great.
That's great.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much, my dear. I look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, and blessings.
In a virtual space or in a physical space.
Totally, and blessings to you and all your sharing. Blessings to everyone there. And thank you, everybody. Shine.